It's time to talk about Teach Me Total War. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, this was an event put on by Creative Assembly, sort of spearheaded by Rubber Duck of War, so a big shout out to him, where a bunch of content creators were invited to pick a trainee, somebody who'd never played Total War Warhammer multiplayer before, and sort of show them the ropes in a limited context, teach them how to play multiplayer, and then those trainees would then compete in a tournament to see who was the best trainer or, whatever. It's just to have some fun and to also promote, new players getting into the game. There's been some other sort of new player tournaments before, but this is really the first time the Creative Assembly themselves have officially sponsored something, so super cool. I was obviously invited, and I had a few people reach out to me when I put out an announcement. I didn't put out like a really big grand announcement, I have to say. And ultimately, I decided to go with trainee a little bit closer to home. That is my real-life brother. For the sake of the channel, we'll call him Brother Grimm. So, Brother Grimm and myself, obviously, have played Total War for a long time. I've told this story on the channel before a few times, but he and I have played since the original Shogun Total War, which was the first Total War ever released, and pretty much both of us have played just about all of the Total Wars that have been released since then, at least the campaigns, right? Neither of us had really played much multiplayer. That changed for me, obviously, with Total War Warhammer 1, when I really jumped in and just, dove headfirst into the multiplayer scene. Credit to, like, Heir of Carthage and Turin for getting me interested and involved in that. And sort of the rest is history for myself. And my brother, while he watches my channel and is interested, he never really dove into it much himself. So I figured he would be a good candidate, being that he's a veteran of many Total War campaigns, countless perhaps Total War campaigns, but never really jumped into this side of it, right? I figured he'd be a perfect candidate as someone to teach. Now, moving on to the actual battle, I've got two battles actually to show you today, both Dark Elves versus Lizardmen. I'm going to be playing the Lizardmen on this first one, and then we'll switch sides on the second. But the context of the tournament here, just to quickly talk about the rules set, it was limited to non-DLCs only, so that is Warhammer 1 and 2 base factions, no DLC factions, and also no Regiment of Renown Lord Pack DLCs. Now, for Bretonnia, that does mean they do get their RORs, however, because Bretonnia is free with Game 1 as a base faction, and all the DLCs came with the 30th Anniversary Regiment of Renown pack, and therefore are also considered free LC. So Bretonnia, perhaps you could argue, is the strongest faction in this particular rules setup, but since Dark Elves are also quite strong, many of their vanilla units are their power units, even in like high-level multiplayer. The same could be said for Lizardmen. I figured these would be a good place to start. I did also ask my brother, like, hey, from the outset, out of the factions that are available here, which one speaks to you the most? Which one would you enjoy playing the most? And he said Dark Elves, and I said, perfect, let's talk about some things. So obviously my brother, being a veteran of Total War, is well familiar with sort of the basics of the game, at least from a campaign perspective, knows about units, their roles, anti-large, sort of the basics, right? I would say he's a good representation probably of a lot of viewers of my channel as well, to be honest. So really what he needed to know primarily was cost effectiveness of units. We didn't really talk much about specific builds, just about, power units, right? Cost-effective units that you're likely to see in a number of matchups. Chameleon Skinks is one that he called out immediately in this matchup, and Marathi as well. Obviously, Manticores were one that I was quick to point out to him as being super strong in multiplayer for anyone that can take them. I believe Dark Elves might actually be the only ones in this rule set that could, but for the builds here, just to quickly go over it as they're clashing, we've got some Skink cohorts up front for Mesaurs, protecting the flanks. Some more cohort with Javs, Mazdamundi, a bit risky up on Slack, but also very powerful. 2 solar engines to help protect against archers. A few lizard cavalry as well, some Coldwind Riders for additional AP and mobility. Chameleon Skinks to protect and I'll provide some extra poison missile fire. A Morathi double manticore for the Dark Elves, repeater crossbows as well to provide some mobile armor piercing, a few corsairs to help with anti-infantry, plenty of spears and sad swords, a couple of bolt throwers for long-range pressure. K-Knight Assassin as well. This is another unit that I pointed out to my brother. You know, a lot of campaign players aren't familiar with sort of the ability and item picking rules, so I was essentially just sort of showing him what these different ones did, what they mean, pointing out ones that were particularly cost efficient. And the K-Knight Assassin quickly became one of his favorite tools, which was really awesome to see, but I'm pressuring pretty hard on this left flank here. Cold Wind Riders, Taurus Warriors have kind of beaten back. The Dark Riders are retreating, preserving their own strength, which is definitely an awesome play. Meanwhile, over here, the Chameleon Skinks trying to set up in a protection. I really should be screening a little bit more forward to try and protect the Solar Engine there. I'm not shooting at Morathi and the Manticore because of the slope and the trees here. Both the Solar Engines would have a hard time making contact with them if we kind of get down eye level and look. You can see here Mazdamundi, though, is running over to try and get at them, terrifying away some of those Saurus on the flank there. Pretty good play. Murderous Prowess now kicking off, which is a potential danger for me, right? All that extra charge bonus, melee attack, and leadership. But Cold Wind Riders are going to go try and shut down those bolt throwers if we can. I'm also zapping that K-Knight Assassin as he has accidentally popped his Web of Shadows a little bit early there, but that's fine. That's what the learning is for, right? Manticore also gets enraged by the Chameleon Skink Fire, drops down into a very disfavorable situation against Mazdamundi, but one thing we had also talked about, and this is something that he sort of instinctively knew from campaign, but just sort of reiterated with him as one of the main points of learning multiplayer. Single entity fights, numbers almost always win, as a rule of thumb. So 3v1 here, Morathi and the double Manticore obviously going to be super strong. Mazdamundi, even with Harmonic Convergence and Apotheosis healing himself, he is going to take quite a bit of damage here, and it's not a good situation at all for me. So I'm going to try and disengage him there, bringing some Skinks to screen out. Also continuing to apply pressure on the repeater crossbows so they can't move in and get additional damage on Mazdamundi here with those armor-piercing missiles. The other Solar Engine, though, is doing a good job of focusing down. There's an argument that you should be trying to just focus down Mazdamundi individually, but he does manage to actually get rid of the Solar Engine here on leadership with a little under half its ammunition remaining, which is pretty substantial. Cold Wind Riders do get back, though, and do shut down that Bolt Thrower, even though the Dark Riders are trying their best to prevent that. A heavy unit like Cold Wind Rider is going to just feast on these light troops here. But the big important fight, obviously, is over here with Mazdamundi again getting dropped on by these flying units. Despite the fact they're all pretty tattered. I mean, the one Manticore is actually pretty healthy here. I just don't really, have availability to try and support. These Cold Wind Riders really should probably peel, but Cold-Blooded, Harmonic Convergence, going to try and keep him in the fight, apply that blinded debuff on some of the things that he's fighting. We've got Chameleons also focusing the Manticores as well, but it's just too much for Mazdamundi at this point. I think Soul Sealer going to be popped over here. Again, probably argument that you should just pop it on Mazdamundi to try and 100% finish him off, but I think he's probably got me here. Maybe, I don't know. Apotheosis, Cold-Blooded, keeping him in the fight. Shield of the Old Ones, also additional leadership and that damage resistance. Try and protect Mazdamundi as long as we can. Skinks and the Cold Wind Riders also moving in. K-Knight Assassin came over. He's got 70 melee attack and poison attacks. This Chameleon Skinks definitely don't want to tangle with him in melee. We're going to try and get them in a position to shoot him instead. Keep these Saurus moving as well. Again, the blinded debuff arguably should be going on these Dark Elf single entities, but I pretty much had thought that Mazdamundi was done for at that point. We'll see. If we can screen him through this Saurus, got these other Cold Wind Riders moving in as well, maybe we can heal him back up, get him in the fight, but so far, from what you're seeing here, given that it's a very close battle after several minutes of slugfest, obviously my brothers, I have to say I'm quite impressed. It's always interesting for me when I get a new patron, and I sort of took not exactly the same approach, because again, it's more limited rule set, but just to see, first time I'm playing somebody that I'm teaching, to sort of get a gauge for where they're at as a player. I have to say I was pretty impressed with my brother, having never played multiplayer before. It's looking pretty good for him at this point. I mean, we'll see. Definitely very close. Mazdamundi able to come back here with just a little bit of Apotheosis, but very quickly going to get dropped once again. That will open up Morathi and the Manticore to some more Chameleon Skink Fire. And also this one Solar Engine, all completely healthy still. The Howdah, I think, can continue to fire. Let's see. Are those skinks eating javelins? They are, so just poisoning everything in an AoE, one of the reasons why Lizardmen monsters are just so strong in general. Basically, not exactly a mortis effect, but a constant area of effect damage, slight damage around them, and more importantly, just applying that nasty poison. But not looking great right now. We'll see for me if this Bastillodon can really carry that hard. The Saurus as well. Gonna take a shot from Arathi here from the Wand of Caradron, just dropping a Doom Bolt right on their heads. Arathi and the Manticore then go to finish off the Solar Engine. Ooh, yeah, brutal shot right there. Thankfully, they weren't too blobbed up like fighting a single entity or something, but there you go. I think I'm probably honestly going to throw in the towel here pretty soon. I mean, it would take some time to clean up all of this, and we had a relatively limited amount of time to practice, so I didn't want to drag this on unnecessarily. Even though I did get the Solar Engine back, it still got 4 shots. I mean, there's a slight chance that I could actually come back and win this, I guess. But I wasn't feeling too confident with my chances, especially as Canine Assassin still got a little bit of ammo left. Marathi's probably realistically got 1 or 2 more Soul Stealers left. So, there you go. Yeah, he manages to take me on that game. So, like I said, very impressed. Absolutely very fun game, and fun stuff. It's interesting to kind of play in a more limited meta. It absolutely changes things, and you sort of realize like what units you could take. And this is, I guess, a lot of tips too for someone who maybe can't afford the DLC, which nothing wrong with that. It's a expensive game. Hopefully there's some sales coming up in the holidays where you could pick up some of the DLCs at a discount. But I understand, with Creative Assembly's DLC policy, it's an extraordinarily expensive for some people to try and get all of the DLCs, especially at full price. I mean, for anyone, actually, for that matter. It's costly, let's say. So, seeing sort of these vanilla-only builds and knowing that you can, with certain factions more than others, I would say, get away with not utilizing the DLCs, just not owning them, and you can still do well in multiplayer, even with all vanilla builds. Dark Elves are definitely in that space. Lizardmen, there's a few for Lizardmen and Dark Elves, like a handful of units that are nice to have, but I wouldn't say are critical necessarily. But anyway, back to this battle here. We'll go through the values. Marathi racks up a ton of value. Canine Assassin doesn't get much by the way of actual value, but the assassination debuff on Mazdamundi is probably very helpful. And of course, the AoE poison is always nice from his attacks. Missile attacks there. Spears did quite well. Blackheart Corsairs kind of get pounded, but sometimes that can happen to them. Repeater crossbows, generally very cost effective, but it's really down to Marathi and the Manticores. Both the bolt throwers also returning some excellent value. For myself, Mazdamundi definitely did not pay out. Needed him to survive a little bit longer, and that's on me. I didn't have a super wide build. The Cold One Riders, generally pretty cost effective, and Solar Engines, despite them getting pretty well countered by the bolt throwers, we were able to get some value out of them in return. Just wasn't quite enough at the end of the day. Still a very close battle, but I have to say, like I said, it's awesome. Like I was so proud. A beautiful moment for me as a person. So without further ado, let's go to the next replay and see what we can do. Now switching sides with myself, taking the Dark Elves. We've switched up the builds a little bit. This is actually the second game we played where I was the Dark Elves. The first time I had taken a Dread Knight build that did very well against what my brother had taken. And as a result, we kind of talked about some different things. In general, the one thing we talked about was Chameleon Skinks versus Pterodon Riders, right? Which situation should you take which unit? And, even though in this matchup, Marathi Double Manticore is a menace, and I would say pretty much every matchup, sometimes it's beneficial to have your skirmish units up in the air, and Pterodon Riders, Chameleon Skinks don't exactly do the same thing. They're both 360 poison shooting units. Chameleons definitely do more damage just purely by shooting. Pterodon Riders have this interesting drop rocks, which you can get good value from if you use it well. Can be a little bit tricky to pull off. They're up in the air, which comes with risks, but also comes with benefits. They do a little bit less DPS, but can pick away for quite a long time and be just super annoying in general, and still return their value back, absolutely. So it's an interesting one. For myself, I've got a few Cold One Chariots here. I'm just a huge fan of this unit in general. We've also got a Hydra here, juiced up with some Chevrons to give it some additional leadership. Fierce Spears up front, some Dark Riders, of course, Repeater Crossbows, and one of those other units for Dark Elves that super strong. In general, Dark Elves' armor-piercing crossbows are quite good, obviously. They're one of the mainstays of the faction. We're going to come in here and shoot a breath through the side of these Saurus Spears. Do quite a bit of damage there. We've got some more Saurus Warriors with shields. Skink Chief on foot. Some more Saurus Spears here. 2 Solar Engines, Mazdamundi up on Zlak. Again, a little bit risky. We need to talk about that as well. Like, obviously, he knows well from campaign. Armor-piercing missiles good against big monsters. But we're going to move in here and get the Chariots and the Hydra going. Wow, the Solar Engine is also going to be interrupted by Marathi, just not allowing it to fire. This is sort of the classic overload on one flank strategy, where I'm just not even really committing these units to the center, just overloading all on this one side, try and do a lot of damage here. That being said, the Hydra is really not doing all that great. We do have the Assassin's Trophy on Mazdamundi. The Hydra's doing some damage to him, but all this Overwatch fire is being concentrated on the Hydra, which is not great. Also going to miss micro a little bit with my cavalry and not exactly get the Dark Riders into Skink Skirmishers in time. But Pterodon Riders are going to be a focus of my fire. We've also trying to focus these repeater crossbows here on Mazdamundi. He did get a hold of the Cold One Chariots as well, so not great for them. Shield of the Old Ones, wow, it says it's on him, but it's actually over here. I'm not really sure how that even works, but let's not question it too much. A banishment also going to be used just to kind of zone the Dark Riders here. Doesn't actually make contact with them, but at the very least keeping them away. Marathi's going to have to pull out of that fight, try and get away the Pterodon Riders now that they don't have a ton of other targets to shoot at. The Solar Engine also could start teeing off on her, so that's not ideal. The Chariots are just going to move back and start to support the Spears against all this infantry, which is what they should be doing anyway. Massive Saurus is an issue. The Skinks not so much, but you can see here how the Chariots don't really have the greatest time pulling through Saurus. So they're some of the heaviest infantry in the game, so that is definitely a problem for them. But the Dark Riders finally did get home on the Skink Skirmishers, start to cut them down, and now we're just getting a brutal rear charge in here that's going to just leadership route a lot of these units on the ground here. So Mazdamundi starting to run out of support. The armor-piercing missiles also feeling pretty bad as they pepper in on him. Just a very uncomfortable situation for Mazdamundi. There's a Soul Stealer just to try and really finish things off. You can see the balance power starting to tip in my favor. Still very close, though, as all these Pterodons are still fighting. There's still a full health Solar Engine over here. A Hydra did come back from route for me, which is great. Obviously, the regeneration of the Hydra is very strong. He maybe had a chance to peel one of the Pterodon Riders out to try and take him down, but now at this point, I've got this strong concave of repeater crossbows here. I'm just protecting the Dark Riders with shields, even though with Murderous Prowess still active, I maybe should still be rear charging these Saurus Spears, but just wanted to play it safe, protect these guys in case he tried to come down with the Pterodons and maybe rush with the Bastildon or something. I don't know. Anyway, this Bastildon over here fighting the Dread Spears, and the Saurus Warriors are going to do quite a bit of damage to the Hydra. Hydra only has 60 armor, and that, fat 52 weapon strength on Saurus means that they do quite a bit of damage. Only 36 defense on the Hydra, too, is not the greatest chance to hit, but since Saurus can get us around, they'll be able to get, hits in the back 180 where they are not subject to as much of the melee defense. Anyway, another Soul Stealer being thrown down there, though, in support of the Hydra. As Marathi jumps in, K-Knight Assassin tied up in Saurus. The Solar Engine's also trying to shoot through the trees here, having a little bit of a tough time, having their shots interrupted, which is a little bit tough, but there you go. Can happen, definitely. We'll see. At this point, I'm feeling pretty confident, though, that I'll be able to take home a win on this one. The Doombolt dropping on Pterodon Riders from the Wand of Kradron there. Dark Riders just once again coming in on nice rear charges, getting good attacks on some of these tattered units. Javelins trying to throw in, ooh, nice hit from the Solar Engine there as I get a giant lag spike. I have no idea what that was. I apologize about that. Anyway. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what was going on there, but anyway, we've got Marathi coming in to clean things up. I mean, at this point, we can probably fast forward. Y'all know the outcome of this is decided, or is it? The Solar Engine comes in, it applies that blinded debuff. The Saurus were doing some damage there, but unfortunately army losses does actually kick in, even though, I don't know, if the Saurus had enough time, I think with Marathi debuffing, her and the Hydra are just too much for them to deal with, but they would have made a pretty valiant last stand. That being said, though, another very fun battle, pretty close. we kind of both came to the conclusion that in this rule set, it does seem like Dark Elves have a fair advantage over Lizardmen, which I think is true. Lizardmen, if you think about sort of their DLC units, right? Like Oxyottl's pretty strong in this matchup. Stalkers are really good in this matchup also, just because of the shock damage of the little explosives is pretty good at dealing with low HP Dark Elf units in general, and you can kind of screen Dark Riders with them pretty efficiently. You know, other DLC lords, you know, Nakai doesn't really do a lot for you here, neither does the Croxy. And like the Sacred Croxigors themselves don't do a lot, but Ripperdactyls are a potentially fun pick as sort of a surprise alongside Tic-Tac-Toe to perhaps surprise Marathi Double Manticore up in the air. So some of the DLC stuff does apply to this matchup, especially from the most recent DLC. But it's definitely an interesting one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I know it's a great experience for me to be able to teach my brother. I just wanted to say big thanks again to Rubber Duck of War for kind of putting this whole thing together, and obviously the Creative Assembly as well. Yeah, I'll be bringing you guys one more practice video of us duking it out in another matchup. I think Dwarfs versus Dark Elves. Again, another Dark Elf matchup, but there you go. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully you learned something from it. A little bit of story time by me as well. So if you did like this content, be sure to give it a like, give it a share. I promise I know English sometimes. Anyway, thanks again. Hopefully you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.